Hi, I am Camille on William Street, and this week we are doing things a little bit different, and we know that there are a lot of kids at home on break right now, so we thought it would be fun to do a series geared specifically for kids and teach them how to make a quilt. So if you are just joining in, make sure to check out yesterday's video where we talked about fabric. And if you have been watching, today we are going to talk about cutting the fabric and get it all ready to sew together. So the things you're going to need to cut out your fabrics are you're going to need a rotary cutter, a ruler, and a mat. These don't need to be anything fancy. Our ruler that we have is a 6x24. It's a real good all-around ruler. If you have those people in your life that already quilt or sew, they may have these things already, hopefully, and you can just borrow them. Something to keep in mind though, these rotary cutters are really, really sharp. You can definitely cut yourself with them. If you can see, there's a way you can put them up and the blade shows, and there's a way to go down and it protects the blade. Always, always, always make sure that you close this before you set it down or walk away. So if you're not using it, make sure that your rotary cutter blade is closed. When you are using it, keep your fingers well out of the way. Don't put your fingers in path. Don't try to cut underneath your arm. Don't try to do something weird. Keep your fingers completely out of the way and use your ruler as a guide. We don't want anybody to get hurt with these rotary blades, and they are very sharp. For this quilt, again, we are doing a disappearing 9 patch. We're going to need the same pieces cut out of all of our different fabrics, all 9 different fabrics. So we're going to be cutting 9 5-inch squares out of each one. So if you have scraps, you can just kind of pull them out and cut them up. If you have a fat quarter, that's going to give you just right about what you need. If you have pieces that you can't get a full 9 out of because you are doing more of a scrappy quilt, that's totally fine, but just make sure that you pull in some extras. So we're going to have 108 5-inch squares when we're all done. So if you don't have 9 fabrics, pull out a piece of paper, do a little bit of math, and then calculate it out to get 108 total 5-inch squares. Okay, so to cut out your fabric, we're going to go ahead and place it on top of our cutting mat. If yours isn't as big as this, like right now, I have my piece of fabric. We're just using scraps, so they're not fat quarters. I just have my piece of fabric folded in half. If yours doesn't fit on here, you can definitely go ahead and fold it in half again, and you can cut your fabric from that too. So don't worry so much how big your cutting mat is. Just make your fabric fit on it, and it will be okay. So I'm going to unfold mine though, since it does fit on the whole thing. And you're going to want to find a straight edge to mark it from. So I'm going to take my ruler, and you can see I've got the lines both directions, and I'm going to place it on my fold. That's a nice straight edge that I can use. And the first thing I'm going to do is line up, well, I've got it on my 22 or my 2. Oh, we're going to bump it down just a little bit so it hits the end of my fabric. Line up one of your lines directly along the top, and then make sure that there's fabric all the way along this side. We want to cut that off first, so we have a nice straight edge to cut the rest of our pieces from. So take your rotary cutter and open it up. Remember, keeping in mind, this is very sharp. Keep your fingers away. I'm going to put some weight right here on my mat, my ruler, and then just pushing right up against my ruler. You're going to go all the way to the end. Before I set this down, I'm going to close it and move that fabric out of the way. Now we have this really nice straight edge to work from. I found it's easiest to keep your ruler on top of the fabric that you're cutting so it doesn't move. So I'm going to go ahead and turn mine around a little bit because I am right-handed, so it's easier for me to cut with my right hand. And then I'm going to line up this along the 5. So this is my 5-inch mark. Remember that we want 5-inch squares for our quilt top. So I'm going to line it up so that the 5-inch lines all the way down, and I'm just going to cut the whole width of fabric. If you have a fat quarter, you're going to have a smaller piece of fabric, or if you have scraps, they might be smaller. That's totally fine. Just make sure it's lined up all the way along whatever width you have. And then I'm going to cut that again all the way to the end. Stop before you get off your cutting mat, or else you're going to put nicks in the table that you're on, and that's probably not going to be the best thing to do. So out of this, let me double check and see just how much of this. I'm going to get 8 out of this, and that's kind of what I figured I would get. So I do need to cut a little bit more. So I'm going to cut one more square really fast before I get rid of this extra fabric. Because I only need one, I'm going to open it up Line up my 5" again. This is a little bit more than 5" because I have to get rid of what's called the selvage. I'll show you that in just a second. And I'm going to cut one more piece here that I can then cut down. Now I can move this out of the way. Pull this piece over, and this is on the end of the fabric. You'll see that there's a side that's like nice. It might have the print on it, the name of the fabric. That's called the selvage, and we don't want to use that in our quilting. So I'm going to make sure to cut that off. So I have this is 5 inches. I need it to be 5 inches this way. So I'm going to go on this edge, line up my ruler. It's fine. Right on that line. The more precise you are here, the more square your quilt top's going to be. So take your time. Don't rush through the quilting. And then I'm just going to cut all that extra off. And I have my first 5" square. Now, let's go back over to this other strip I cut. And I can actually cut this 2 layers at a time. That's going to be totally fine. First thing I'm going to do is cut off my selvage. So line it up right along the edge there so it's nice and straight. We want to get nice 90-degree right angles with this cutting. Then we're just going to cut the 2 squares. So start here, line it up along the edge, cut my 5 inches, and that gives me 2 more. And then just keep going, moving your fabric as you need to around your cutting mat so that it's always on there. And I have one more set, and then that will give me my 9 finished squares. Now remember, if you're using scrap fabrics and you can't get a full 9 out of it, that's fine. Just make sure you pick a couple extra fabrics to make sure that we have 108 total. So if you look at some of these other ones, other pieces of fabric that we have, they're not as straight and even. So you're just going to work with whatever fabric we have here and make the 9 pieces cut. So cut a nice long piece and then cut your 5" squares out of it. If you have shorter pieces, cut as many 5" squares as you can. But start with the strips and then cut all your strips down into 5" squares. So just repeat that process with all of your different fabrics. And then, yeah, just up there. Okay, so now we have all of our squares cut out. Remember, you need 108 different squares for this quilt top. And this is going to make a nice little throw size quilt, something you can throw over the top of you when you're watching movies, cuddling on the couch. If you want to make it bigger, you're obviously going to need more. But for this project, we're just going to go ahead and start with our 108. If you don't have access to a cutting mat or you don't want to worry about cutting mat, maybe you're sewing with someone you're a little bit younger and don't want to deal with that, another option you can do for this quilt is you can buy what's called charm packs. If you go to the fabric store and ask them for the charm packs, they can show you where those are, and those are going to give you 5" squares that are already cut out, and you're going to have a whole bunch of different options to pick from. So that is something that you can think about as well if you are a little young to be cutting with this, or of course if you are young, definitely ask for help. Don't try to use the rotary cutter and the cutting mat by yourself. Ask for help. Have an adult or a responsible teenager help you out with that cutting so that nobody gets hurt. So now that you have your fabrics cut out, go ahead and set them aside, and tomorrow we're going to come back and we're going to start sewing them together. And it's going to be a lot of fun, so we will see you then. Bye.